The world of AI just keeps spinning faster and faster, doesn't it? New models, new research. It feels, almost impossible to keep up.
It really does. You blink, and there's another major development.
Exactly. So that's what we're doing here today. We've sifted through a whole pile of sources covering June 6th, 2025, really gone deep. And the mission is pretty simple. Pull out the most important bits, the key insights, basically give you a shortcut to knowing what's actually happening right now in AI.
Yeah, we'll be looking at the big model releases that are shaking things up, some interesting research ideas floating around. It's just trying to get a feel for what the community is talking about.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The model that seems to be making the most noise right now is Gemini 2.5 Pro.
Absolutely. From what we've seen, Google's latest preview, specifically that 0605 version, it's taken back the top spot on the LMArena leaderboard.
Right, LMArena. That uses the ELO system, like chess rankings, kind of pitting models against each other in conversation. So top spot there is a pretty big deal. What were the numbers?
It hit a score of 1470. That's a solid jump, plus 24 ELO points. And the sources are pointing to real improvements in coding, reasoning, math, the core stuff.
Okay. And wasn't there one benchmark where it really took off?
Yeah, that was AIDER Polyglot, scored 82.2%. That benchmark tests how well it works as a coding assistant across different languages, fixing bugs, refactoring code. And what really stood out was someone noting his performance there has been, quote, going parabolic since March.
Going parabolic. Wow. That's quite a statement. And how does it stack up on cost?
Well, on that same AIDER benchmark, Gemini 2.5 Pro apparently comes in more than 3 times cheaper than the O3 model.
Okay, that cost performance thing is huge, isn't it? Better results for less money, that's what everyone wants. Any other, specific new tricks?
There was a really interesting one, actually. Its new ability to take an image and convert it precisely into an Excalidraw chart.
Oh, Excalidraw, the diagramming tool. So, take a photo of a whiteboard sketch and it becomes an editable diagram.
Exactly. Super useful for certain workflows, I imagine.
Definitely niche, but cool. And just general knowledge. How's it doing there?
We also saw reports mentioning strong performance in just, real-world factual questions. Suggests the general knowledge base has improved, too.
Okay, so on paper, the scores look good, price is attractive, some neat features, but benchmarks aren't always the full picture, are they? What are people actually finding when they use it?
And yeah, this is where it gets maybe a little more complicated based on the feedback we saw. Some users found it, and this is a direct quote, absolutely dog at coding.
Absolutely dog. Ouch.
Yeah, especially for complex stuff, like someone trying to simulate a 3D solar system. For serious coding, some devs are still saying, stick with Opus for now.
Right, and that feeling seems to connect with some of the, let's say, skepticism around the benchmarks themselves.
It does, yeah. People pointed out some weird discrepancies, like the Swebench verified scores. Apparently lower than the previous version, the 0506 one.
Huh. Swebench is another coding test, right? Focused on real-world code changes?
Exactly. So you have one coding benchmark looking amazing, another looking worse than before. It makes you wonder about its coding skills across different types of tasks.
Yeah, highlights how tricky it is to really measure these things properly.
Totally. And there's also confusion around the comparisons to O3. We saw reports citing wildly different success rates, like 49.4% in one table, but 69.1% somewhere else for, supposedly similar things. It's hard to get a clear picture.
So conflicting numbers, mixed user reviews, especially for coding. Is there a reason suggested for this, like fast but maybe uneven progress?
Well, one thing that was highlighted as a big plus for Google is their infrastructure. The sources suggest their ability to iterate and deploy these models super quickly is key.
Oh, okay.
And that probably feeds into that cost-performance advantage, right? Getting similar scores for maybe a quarter of the cost of O3 on some benchmarks.
That rapid iteration makes sense for driving down costs, but maybe it also explains some of the friction users are feeling.
Seems likely. People mentioned frustration with just the version naming, like is it 0605 or 0506? Sounds small, but it's a headache if you need stability.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then there were specific bugs, like the Flash version apparently getting stuck in loops, generating infinite repetitions in structured output.
Oh no, like the appearance, red-rimmed eyes, red-rimmed eyes.
Yeah.
Example. That sounds awful.
Exactly like that.
Well,
and for coding, some didn't like how the chat mode handles changes. Instead of showing a diff, like just the lines that changed, it apparently duplicates the whole file.
Which is much less helpful if you're trying to track modifications.
Right, compared to tools like AIDER that developers are used to.
Okay, so summing up Gemini 2.5 Pro, Looks like impressive benchmark jumps in places, great cost efficiency, probably thanks to fast iteration. But that comes with some user experience hiccups, confusing benchmark results, and maybe not quite living up to the hype yet for really complex coding.
That feels like a fair summary based on what we read. Lots of potential, but definitely some rough edges still showing.
All right, moving on. Gemini wasn't the only game in town this week. Some exciting stuff happening in open source too, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. The Qwen team dropped new embedding and re-ranking models, open weight,
nice.
and described in the sources as state-of-the-art, plus totally free.
Completely free. That's always good news for developers.
It really opens things up. And the Qwen 3 embedding 8B model, the big one, it actually grabbed the #1 spot on the MTEB multilingual leaderboard.
MTEB, that's the big benchmark for embedding quality across different languages and tasks.
Exactly. Semantic similarity, retrieval, clustering, the works. And it apparently outperformed even Google's experimental Gemini embedding model from earlier this year.
Yeah.
It's a pretty strong showing for open source.
Huge win. What does that mean practically for someone wanting to use them?
Well, they're supported by vLLM, the serving engine, so deploying them efficiently should be straightforward. We saw one user put it really well. Every ROG system on Earth just got a free upgrade.
Huh? Yeah, RAG relies heavily on good embeddings for retrieving information. So a free top-tier embedding model is a massive boost for anyone building those systems.
It really is. And they released a few sizes, 0.6B, 4B, and this 8B one. Supports 119 languages, showing state-of-the-art results across MTEB and MTEB code.
Okay.
And there was some discussion noting these are dedicated embedding models trained specifically for this job, unlike just using your general LLM's embeddings. That might be why they perform so well.
Specialization winning out. Makes sense. Any other notable open source releases?
Yeah, OpenThinker 3.7b popped up, introduced as the new state-of-the-art 7b parameter model specifically for reasoning using open data. It was trained on the OpenTalks 3 dataset.
7B is that sweet spot, isn't it? Often powerful enough, but potentially runnable locally. Another SODEC claim.
Yep. The team reported a 33% improvement over a DeepSeek Qwen distilled model on a key reasoning benchmark. And they made a point of saying this shows, a cracked team and a limited budget can still take on Goliaths, really emphasizing the power of open datasets.
That's a great message for the open source community, that you don't necessarily need mega resources to compete if you're smart about it and share data.
It is. Though, as always, the community discussion added some nuance. Some pointed out another model, DeepSeek 0528 Qwen 38B, reportedly gets even higher scores, so that SOTA title might be short-lived or debated.
Okay.
And people were asking how exactly academic or nonprofit groups get access to the kind of compute needed, like 512 A100s isn't exactly sitting around. Plus, some criticism that its benchmark comparisons were mostly against older models.
Right, the benchmark critiques, again, it's a constant theme, it seems.
It really is. You always have to look closely. But speaking of that accessible size range, 7B, 8B, 12B, there's clearly tons of excitement there. Models that pack a punch, but you might actually run yourself.
On your own hardware, yeah. That's the dream for many.
Totally. We saw chatter comparing models like DeepSeek R1-8B and Qwen 8B. Some private user tests suggested DeepSeek's R1-8B might be better for coding, math, reasoning, while Qwen 8B felt maybe more natural for writing or multilingual stuff.
Yeah.
So, trade-offs.
Interesting. So even in the same size class, you might pick one over the other depending on your main tasks.
Exactly. And again, skepticism popped up about some benchmark claims, like Qwen 3.8b reportedly beating much larger models like Claude Sonnet 3.7 by a lot. Some users found that hard to swallow, questioning the tests again.
So, bottom line, benchmarks are a guide, but you really need to test them on your specific problem, especially with these accessible models.
That seems to be the wise approach. Oh, and one more in that accessible space. Homunculus 12b.
Homunculus 12b, what's the story there?
It's a distilled model. They basically took the smarts from the huge Qwen 3235b model and trained this smaller 12b model built on the Mistral Nemo architecture to act like it.
Distillation. Making big models smaller and faster. What's special about this one?
Well, it was flagged as being uncensored, also capable of explaining things simply like giving a clear explanation of gravity. It keeps Qwen's think and nothing modes, which is useful for seeing reasoning steps. And the kicker, runs on a single consumer GPU.
Wow. Uncensored, good reasoning, runs locally. That really shows the kind of power becoming available outside the big clouds.
It's a definite trend. And it's not just text models seeing big leaps, Other areas are moving fast, too.
Like what else caught your eye?
11 Labs. They just released 11v3 in alpha for now. calling it their most expressive text-to-speech model ever.
11 Labs is already pretty top tier for TTS. How much better is this V3?
Well, the descriptions we saw of the demo samples were pretty striking. Things like almost indistinguishable from real speech.
Whoa. Almost indistinguishable.
Yeah. The big improvements seem to be in the subtleties, better prosody, more natural breathing sounds, capturing nuanced intonation. Older models sometimes struggled with sounding natural during, say, long emotional sentences, but V3 apparently handles that much better. It just adds that extra layer of realism.
That has massive implications, doesn't it? What kind of industries could this disrupt?
You immediately think of things like audiobook narration, maybe podcasting like this, definitely video game voice acting. The quality is getting so high it could genuinely automate or significantly change workflows in those areas. Plus, it supports over 70 languages.
Okay, so amazing quality, wide language support. Is it, like, readily available for everyone?
Affordable?
Well, that's the catch. While the quality gets rave reviews, it is a closed source model. And the sources did point out that using it at scale for production comes with a significant cost compared to some of the open source alternatives that are starting to emerge.
Right. So another example of that tension. Cutting-edge proprietary tech versus increasingly good, accessible, open options.
Exactly that tension.
Makes sense. Okay, shifting gears slightly. Were there any broader takeaways from the sources, like about research directions or just the general vibe in the AI world right now?
Yeah, actually, a really interesting insight came from Greg Brockman at OpenAI. He was speaking at the AI Engineer World's Fair, and he apparently emphasized that for scaling future models, basic research is back. Basic research is back. What do you think that signals?
Well, it kind of suggests that maybe just scaling up current architectures with more data and compute is hitting diminishing returns, you know?
Right.
So to get the next big breakthroughs, maybe better reasoning or handling much longer contexts or true multimodality, we need to go back to fundamentals. New architectures, new training methods, maybe even new theoretical understandings. It sounds like a call to invest more in the underlying science again, not just engineering tweaks.
That's pretty significant coming from OpenAI. Suggests a potential shift in focus for the big labs, maybe. Was any specific research area highlighted as being fundamental like that?
Meta-learning came up, sometimes called learning to learn. One source defined it as training a model not just on one task, but training it to get good at adapting quickly to new tasks, even with just a few examples.
Huh. So it's not just learning facts, it's learning the skill of learning itself.
Pretty much, yeah. The breakdown involved a base learner trying the specific task, and then a meta learner watching how the base learner adapts and sort of coaching it, updating its general strategy so it gets better at learning anything faster.
Wow, okay. That sounds incredibly useful for creating AI that can handle novelty in unexpected situations without needing tons of retraining each time.
Exactly. It feels foundational for building more generally capable, adaptable AI. And this ties into some of the broader themes we saw humming in the background.
What recurring topics kind of jumped out from the community discussions?
Well, as we've already touched on a few times, the whole debate around benchmarks is just constant right now.
Right.
Lots of talk about benchmark overfitting, worries that data sets are getting contaminated with AI output, this idea of the leaderboard illusion.
Right.
Our company's just releasing versions tweaked to top the charts, not necessarily the best overall model.
So those soda rankings. Useful, but handle with care and a dose of skepticism.
Definitely a healthy dose. Another huge theme was just how cheap intelligence is getting. Multiple people commented on LLMs becoming ridiculously cheap.
Any specific examples that stood out?
Yeah, one user mentioned their company works with insurance policies. Feeding an entire complex policy document into Gemini for analysis apparently cost them about 1 cent.
1 cent to analyze a whole insurance policy. Wow.
Yeah, think about the scale that enables. Tasks that were just too expensive or time-consuming before suddenly become feasible. The economics are changing rapidly.
Truly transformative.
On a different note, but super important for anyone building things, data privacy. This was amplified by a court order telling OpenAI they have to preserve all ChatGPT logs.
All of them, including like temporary chats or API calls.
That was the key bit highlighted, yeah. Even temporary chats people might have thought disappeared, and API requests from developers. Understandably, that sparked concerns about data retention and who might access it.
That's definitely critical info. Need to assume nothing is truly ephemeral, even if the interface suggests it might be.
Precisely. And finally, just quick mentions of developer tools gaining traction. DSPy got described as feeling like the closest thing to Rails for AI.
Wow, comparing it to Ruby on Rails is high praise indeed. That framework really shaped web development.
Right. Suggests DSPy is becoming really important for structuring AI app development. And LMArena Index released production-ready tools, like a spreadsheet agent for handling messy Excel files, and another for automating data extraction from SEC filings.
Those are very practical, specific business automation tools, moving beyond general chat.
Exactly. Automating vertical tasks. We also saw mentions of things like FastPlaid speeding up certain RAG models, and Morphlabs hiring Christian Segedi, a big name in deep learning, to work on verified superintelligence.
So from optimizing current systems to tackling the fundamentals of superintelligence, the range is just huge.
It really is all happening at once.
Okay, so pulling back from this deep dive for June 6th, we've seen quite a bit. New big models like Gemini 2.5 Pro pushing limits on cost and performance, but also getting scrutinized for consistency and usability. At the same time, really powerful open source options like the Qwen embedding models and OpenThinker are making top-tier capabilities, especially for things like embeddings and reasoning, accessible to basically everyone.
Yeah, and we saw incredible progress in other areas, like text-to-speech with ElevenLabs v3 getting scarily close to human quality. Plus, those foundational ideas bubbling up the call for basic research. The potential of meta-learning.
All playing out against that backdrop of ongoing debates about benchmarks, the plummeting cost of AI, and those critical privacy questions.
It's definitely not slowing down. And that tension you mentioned earlier between the cutting-edge stuff happening in closed labs and the amazing power being put out by the open source world, it feels central right now.
It really does. It's a truly dynamic landscape.
For sure.
It leaves you wondering, though, doesn't it? How is that tension between these super advanced, maybe slightly opaque proprietary models and these increasingly capable, totally open alternatives? How is that going to shape what gets built and by whom over the next few months?
That really feels like the core question driving so much of what we're seeing, yeah.
Definitely something to keep watching. Until our next deep dive.